Welcome to Encounter Wargaming. Today we're going to continue our metaphysical discussion on gods. Specifically, we're going to take a look at the Necron gods, better known as the Catan. As usual, I'm Jay, and this is Warhammer 40k Metaphysics 101. In the last couple episodes, we explored how we define what a god is in 40k. We've also covered how a god is made. Today we're going to cover a race that was once worshipped as gods, but are not gods in the truest sense of the word, as per the definition we decided on in the last couple episodes. The race I'm referring to is the Catan. The Catan are possibly the most ancient race in the galaxy. They came into being long before any actual gods were birthed into existence. In fact, we don't even know if the Immaterium was even a thing back then, since the first sentient race to experience it was the Old Ones, at least that we have records of, which came along long after the Catan first appeared. Since the Immaterium is shaped by the thoughts and emotions of sentient races, it's unclear if it was even a thing back then. You know, the whole tree falls in the forest thing. The Catan were given their name by the Necron tier, the race that would eventually become the Necrons. In the Necron language, the word Catan literally translates to star god or star vampire, which is both pretty descriptive of what the Catan are. In the days before they encountered other sentient beings, the Catan fed on the immense amount of energy released by stars. They possess a pair of wings, for lack of a better word, that envelop a star so that they can slowly drain it of its energy until it dies, at which time the Catan will use said wings to travel on waves of electromagnetic flux like an interplanetary sail, in the hopes of finding the next star to drain of energy. Eventually, the Necron tier would discover one of these Catan feasting on a dying star while the Necron tier were studying said star. How they made contact with these unfathomable monstrosities is unknown, but doing so would change the galaxy forever. The Catan have no presence in the warp, whereas other gods exist solely within the warp. This is what makes them the exception to the rule, since the gods of other races are all warp-spawned creatures. The Catan, on the other hand, are simply the oldest Xenos race in existence, literally. But they're not quite physical either. I say this because they're beings of pure energy with an immortal lifespan. If you were to describe an immortal being made of pure energy, most of us would consider that the basic definition of a god. I guess the Necron tier had the same criteria. The thing is, the Necron tier have no knowledge of the warp, and neither do the Catan. That is, they didn't until they came across the Old Ones. And they soon became jealous of the Old Ones, which spawned the War in Heaven. But that's a topic for another time. To set the scenario for those who are new to this, or those that have no knowledge of the Necron fluff at all, the Necron tier developed on a world that orbited an unstable star. This star released immense amounts of radiation that left the Necron tier with short lifespans, filled with cancer and other illnesses related to solar radiation. Because the Necron tier experienced a very short lives, they placed a lot of value on their dead. Their cities were more or less giant tomb structures consisting of towering mausoleums that housed their dead ancestors. Due to this, the Necron tier lived their lives surrounded by their dead ancestors as a reminder that their lives are short. Strangely enough, this allowed their race to develop very quickly, technologically. With the knowledge that their lives will be short, each citizen would attempt to achieve great things that would help their race and immortalize them after death. This led to a very quick, rapid technological evolution for the Necron tier, which made them a spacefaring race very quickly. The problem was they were only able to travel at sublight speeds, and as a result had to put their people into stasis while they were traveling between star systems, since it took so long to do so. And their lives are very short. They built their ships out of material called necrodermis, which is basically living metal, which they would find a few other uses for, as you will find as this video unfolds. With an existence that involves a constant reminder that death is on the doorstep, so to speak, the Necrontyrs' religion really centered around a god of death, as well as a few other deities. These are the forms the Catan took in order to deceive the Necrontyr into worshipping them as gods. And that they did. The Necrontyr very quickly became subservient to the Catan and saw them as their salvation from their life of pain and misery. The Catan, however, could not understand what it was to live a mortal life. The Necrontyr, on the other hand, had very short lives and so understood mortality far too well. In order to help their gods understand what it means to be mortal, the Necrontyr made bodies for them from necrodermis. Since this material was basically a living metal, it was durable enough to house the powerful energies that the Catan consisted of. So, it was that the star gods began to walk amongst their followers. Without going through the entire story of the Necrons and the war in heaven, which I do plan to cover in a future playlist, not in this metaphysical one, but I do plan to do some further fluff videos in the future, it's worth stating now that the Catan realized that feasting on the life energy of sentient beings was just as tasty as the energy of stars, especially when their prey is in a state of fear or terror. It was this taste for life force that caused the Catan to manipulate the Necron followers and forever doom them to a soulless existence. Long story short, the Necrontyr grew jealous of an ancient race known as the Old Ones. The Old Ones had not only mastered the secret to eternal life, but had also mastered the use of the Immaterium, something the Necrontyr and the Catan had no knowledge of. Neither of which had any presence in the warp, and therefore no way to utilize its gifts. The Necrontyr did in fact wage war against the Old Ones in an attempt to gain their knowledge of immortality, as well as other technologies, such as the webway, which allowed the Old Ones to travel far and wide at an extremely short time span. You could literally travel from one end of the galaxy to the other in a matter of moments. After their defeat at the hands of the Old Ones, the Necrontyr ended up siding with the Catan in order to defeat their bitter enemy. The Catan convinced the Necrontyr that they as well had lost a war against the Old Ones, and that together they could surely defeat this mutual adversary. The truth is, the Catan had little reason to fight the Old Ones at all. They had simply found a way to prey on the Necrontyr's weakness in order to take advantage of the race and take from them that which is most valuable to the Catan, which is their life force. It was at this time that the Catan, named the Deceiver, tricked the Necrontyr into using their necrodermis technology to make themselves robotic bodies that they could transfer their consciousness into in order to free themselves from the diseases and cancer that were a constant part of their lives and ingrained in their DNA because of that horrible star system they had originated from. So the Necrontyr built giant biofurnaces that they would use to transfer their consciousness into necrodermis bodies through a procedure called biotransference. What the Necrontyr didn't account for is that even though their consciousness would be transferred, their life force would be separated from them, leaving it as food for their Catan masters. So the Necrontyr entered these furnaces in droves while the Catan flew overhead feasting on the life force of all the Necrontyr. They say it was after Zarek, the last of the Silent Kings of the Necrons, went through the biotransference that he realized that he had damned his race. Even though he would no longer experience the pain of flesh, he felt he was missing his soul. We'll get into souls later in this series and attempt to define exactly what a soul is. What Zarek refers to as a soul may or may not be the true definition of what a soul is. But the point to get across is the same. The Catan gave the Necrons the immortal existence they craved, but at a horrible cost. Many of the Necrons lost their autonomy completely, while the more important members of Necron society were allowed to keep some of their personality in order to lead the newly made ranks of zombie robots. The Catan had deceived and betrayed their followers. The Necrons did in fact eventually end up making the Catan their slaves instead of being enslaved by them. They did this by breaking the Catan into shards. In other words, breaking them into pieces so that they could be contained. Shards are a concept we'll also cover in later content. In the previous episode, we talked about Cain being separated into shards by Slaanesh in order to become the avatars of the Eldari craft worlds. The concept here is similar, but not quite the same thing. So I'll dedicate a video to shards in the future in order to do it justice. But for now, we will cover the fact that the Necrons overpowered the race that tricked them by shattering them into shards that could be imprisoned and used as weapons on the battlefield. They did this through devices known as a Tesseract Vault. I might get into more detail on these devices in the shards video, not sure yet, but for now, you'll be happy to know that the Necrons were no longer slaves to these beings. Seeing the Eldari, though, as the dominant race in the galaxy now that the old ones had left, and knowing that they themselves had an eternal life, the Necrons decided to sleep until other sentient races of the galaxy had basically died out, and they could awake once more and claim the stars as their own. That's basically all we have time for today. To summarize, we can see why the Necron tier thought the Catan were gods. However, they are not truly gods like the other gods of the Warhammer Universe are. They are worth discussing when on the topic of gods because the Necron tier treated them as such, but also because they managed to break them into shards. Since we also talked about Cain being broken into shards, I felt the Catan needed to be included in this progression of vlogs in order to show you all basically the bigger picture here. So I hope you're enjoying this series so far. I've had a lot of fun compiling and recording it for you. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future content. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on the Catan or even on the concept of shards in order to prepare for that discussion in the future. So make sure to hit me up in the comments below. I always answer all of our comments, so again, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this matter. That being said, sharing is also one of the best ways you can help us grow. So make sure to share this with your friends, which allows us to make better content and more content for you in the future. Also, if you'd like to help support us, head to the description below and check out our Patreon campaign. There you'll find many reward tiers for very small contributions. But if a regular monthly contribution isn't your thing, you can also check out our Spreadshirt page and pick yourself up a t-shirt with our logo on it, and it helps us out with a couple of bucks and, you know, keeps the lights on, so to speak. So once again, make sure you hit me up in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Catan as well as Catan shards, and whether or not you think the Catan are actual gods or if they're pretending to be gods, which seems to be where we're headed there. But either way, I would love to get a discussion going, so make sure to comment below, and we'll see you at our next encounter.
Like a monkey in a rocket on its way back home. Okay.